Canada Post is back, and it seems no one is sending more letters than Liberal MPs. The latest is this letter Wayne Long sent to his caucus colleagues today, asking them to come forward against leader Justin Trudeau. It says what happened with former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is not just embarrassing, it's an indictment of the chaos and insularity within the Prime Minister's inner circle. Long writes that this is about saving our party from a historic defeat, and punctuates it by saying silence is complicity. Wayne Long is a Liberal MP from New Brunswick, and he joins me now. Wayne Long, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me on your show, David.
You've written a letter. It's quite the week for political letters, it seems. You're telling your fellow Liberals that silence is complicity. What are you saying to them in that?
We need to meet the moment, and clearly with, Chrystia Freeland doing what she did, and not just the letter, but, the directness, the bluntness, the message, and most importantly, the timing of that letter speaks volumes. And we need to meet the moment. Like, we're elected officials. We are elected to represent Canadians. We are elected to represent our constituents. And the Prime Minister himself has said we are to be voices in our riding that convey those voices in Ottawa. And look at the polls from coast to coast to coast. I mean, we're basically at a point where 1 in 5 Canadians are supporting us. My colleagues are all underwater in their ridings or close to being underwater. We are hearing from our constituents. I hear it in the lobby. I hear it in the halls. Like, everybody talks about the elephant in the room, and sadly, the elephant in the room is Justin Trudeau. And it's time for us to meet that moment. And, like I said yesterday, Chrystia Freeland doing what she did, and then hearing after the fact how she was Zoomed and told that Mark Carney would replace her, yet they still wanted her to read the fall economic statement. It's bizarro world. It's unthinkable that anybody around the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister would think that there wouldn't be a reaction or consequences to doing what they did, and equally how they did it to her. And it's symptomatic of what we've seen from PMO and those around the Prime Minister for, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years now. They are not in touch with reality.
You say in your letter that what happened with Freedom was embarrassing. You call it an indictment of the chaos and the insularity within the Prime Minister's inner circle. Look, you've not been shy about expressing your views on this for quite some time. You and Ken McDonald were the early adopters of this movement. There's no shortage of backbenchers willing to say the same thing pretty much right now. Your colleague Jenica Atwin, another New Brunswick MP, has also said today he's got to go and she won't run again if he doesn't leave, which is a bit of an escalation for someone who we thought was going to be a Liberal candidate for sure. What does it take, do you think, if these messages aren't getting through? What will it take to get what you think the Liberal Party needs here?
Well, I think we've kind of learned, some of us have learned going on. I mean, clearly, June 30th, I came out and kind of was a lone wolf coming out asking for the Prime Minister to step down. And then we had, 9 members sign a letter. And then we presented the letter at caucus with, give or take 23 members. But, I think what we've learned this time is we can't back off. We need to continue through with the momentum and continue to do what we set out to do, which is to convince the Prime Minister to step down, to read the room, to listen to Canadians and step down. Case in point, we've had other colleagues. Jenica is a perfect example of someone that's come out today and said she will not run again under the Prime Minister. And that momentum is growing, trust me. The calls I'm getting today, the reaction to my letter, the reaction to my colleagues who are continuing to say, enough is enough. Again, David, we're elected to represent Canadians.
Right.
Also, I want to call out the ministers. Like, are there ministers that agree with what we're saying and doing? Absolutely. There's 36 to 40 members of cabinet, floating number. Are you telling me that nobody in that cabinet is willing to speak out and agree with Chrystia Freeland, with, the backbench dissenters, I guess we're called this week? Like, yes, there are ministers that agree with me. How do I know? Because they've told me so. So, with respect, don't walk out of caucus meetings and say, we're firmly behind the Prime Minister, everything is all good, let's whistle past the graveyard here and move to another day. We're heading for oblivion, and we need to stand up as elected representatives, do the right thing,
Right.
convince the leader to step down,
I,
come forth with a new leader, and have a chance to win the next election.
I presume you're not going to tell me which ministers have told you they think the Prime Minister should go, but have you seen the ministers who have spoken to you privately and said this, then go in front of cameras and say, we're all united behind the Prime Minister? Because that is the job of a minister, but are there people publicly professing one thing and privately saying something else?
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. I get the inner cabinet circle. I get this solidarity, but they're also elected. And, we owe it to Canadians. Like, we owe it to Canadians to present an alternative that has a chance to win the next election. Like, everything we have built, everything we have brought forward, the Canada Child Benefit, daycare, climate action, housing policies. I mean, the list goes on and on. That is all at risk of being wiped out under a pure Poilievre government. And we see the polls. Like, we're a party of science. Show me a poll. Show me data that says that we're in good shape. We're underwater. We were taking on water 3 months ago.
Right.
We're underwater right now.
So Wayne Long, does
We
it
need a lifeline.
does it take a critical mass of cabinet ministers to force this issue? Is that what you think? Is it one? Is it two? Is it five? Because there were 24 MPs. That number has apparently grown. I don't know if they're signing the letter that Sophie Chattel is reportedly the keeper of, or if they're just getting ready to say it publicly. But what do you think it is? Is it a critical mass of the caucus? Is it a number of cabinet ministers? What do you think it would take to convince the Prime Minister?
Honestly, I believe that on Monday, when Minister Freeland sent her letter, all it would have took would probably be 2 or 3 more ministers to say, we agree with Chrystia Freeland. I was around, and obviously, I remember Nate Erskine-Smith and I voted for the inquiry into our own government with Jody Wilson-Raybould. Like, right. I don't want to see that happen again. I don't want to see Chrystia Freeland be villainized for what she did, or she's selfish. She did what she had to do. She said what she had to say because she knows where we're heading. She knows we're at a complete impasse. We don't have a lot of direction right now, and we need a change. So I'm just basically, again, appealing, saying what we all know to be true, is that the Prime Minister needs to step down for the good of our party, for the good of our country. And as elected officials who are elected to speak up for our ridings, we need to speak truth.
So Wayne Long, just one last quick question before I let you go. We know what you want him to do. I mean, you're very explicit. There's no room for misinterpretation. What do you think he will do? The Prime Minister, as we're having this conversation, is still looking at options and reflecting, speaking with current and former advisors and consulting on a path forward. What path do you think he takes?
I mean, there's no path that he could take that isn't going to end with a dead end. Like, he needs to step back, understand the situation. It's been a wonderful 9.5 years, but the political candle, the wick is burned out. You can't relight a wick that's burnt. People have turned off on the Prime Minister. Is it unfortunate? Is it fair? It's not fair. It is unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is, there's a visceral dislike for the Prime Minister from coast to coast to coast. He needs to own it. He needs to realize it's not the Justin Trudeau Party of Canada. It's the Liberal Party of Canada. We're all elected members of the Liberal Party of Canada. Right. And I'm not trying to torpedo the Liberal Party. In fact, I'm trying to save the Liberal Party from itself.
New Brunswick Liberal MP Wayne Long. Thank you for being here today, sir. And if we don't talk again, have a good holiday.
Yeah, you also. Thank you.
Okay, I want to turn now to a Liberal MP from the opposite coast of Canada. Ken Hardy is an MP from British Columbia, a Liberal, of course, and he joins me now. Ken Hardy, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
David, good to be here.
Same question I asked Wayne Long there at the end. You've also suggested there should be a change in leadership at your party, but the Prime Minister has so far resisted that. I mean, what do you think Justin Trudeau is going to do at the end of this period of reflection?
Well, I can't say, but I think this time around it's a little bit different. When we had the caucus meeting in which a number of us stood up and said that we needed a change, he said he would reflect, and the reflection period was pretty short. This is a longer reflection period, and I think that that's probably a sign that he's reading the tea leaves. He's not an unintelligent guy. And I think he knows what's good for the country in this case. It'll be difficult for him because he's put so much into this. But I honestly think he will resign.
You do. You believe he will go because
Yes.
there are others who have been more skeptical. We had Yvonne Baker, Sean Casey, and Alexander Mendez on the show. Two of the three thought he was going to stay. What makes you think this time it's different?
I think that, it's just the dynamics around Ms. Freeland's departure. There was just something in the air, something in him, I think, that demonstrated that this was very, very troubling for him. And I think that, all along, I know that he's felt that he is the person to keep Canada out of the clutches of Pierre Poilievre. But he may come to the conclusion that him not being there will keep the country out of the clutches of Pierre Poilievre and keep things like supply management in place, like the CBC. We can't do without you guys. And Pierre Poilievre is bound and determined to wreak that kind of damage on the country, and we can't have it.
But, if the Prime Minister comes to the same conclusion after this period of reflection that he came to after the last period of reflection and decides he's going to stay, what do MPs like you do then? Wayne Long has written this letter calling for people to take more urgent action, wanting cabinet ministers to join this push. What do you do if he doesn't go?
Well, I mean, we just keep on keeping on because I've had if you like, a theory, and it's something I put into practice about leader-proofing your riding. And you do that by looking after the customers at home, right? You look after people and you stay close to them. You reflect their voices in Ottawa. Although I have to say that at home, I don't get that many people coming up and telling me that, that Mr. Trudeau has to go. The general buzz, though, and it's been this way for 6 years, in fact, is that people in degrees were turning away from him, and it's reached a crescendo at this point. But at the same time, as long as I am a member, and I will be until election night, whenever that is, I'm going to look after the folks at home, and that's really my job.
The last time you were here, I asked you if you were one of the 24 MPs who signed the caucus letter, and you wouldn't say at the time. You said you wanted to keep it in caucus. Any clarity to add on that? Because we've heard there's a new effort to add names to that and try to grow it and present a new demand or a new statement to the Prime Minister. Were you part of the original effort? What do you know about what's happening now?
I was part of the original effort. I thought at that time it was a way to, I hate to use the expression, but send a shot across the bow. But this isn't the first shot, David. 2 years ago, maybe 3 at Summer Caucus. There was
in London.
In London, there was this conversation going on, and he was resolute at the time that he understood what was happening, but he felt that there was a pathway forward. And when you and I last spoke, I said what I was looking for is that engaging argument as to why he and the Liberal Party should be back in government after the next election. Well, here we are a month or so later, and that hasn't happened. We've gone the other way.
So, look, we've had a lot of members of your caucus, and more letter signers are revealing themselves throughout this process, who have said the Prime Minister needs to go. They've not put a name out to say this is who should replace him. Where are you on that? If not Justin Trudeau, who?
Well, I'm taking a very practical look at this. 2 things. First, I think it's somebody who's been there doing heavy lifting. To parachute somebody in from the outside is a recipe for the kind of disasters that we've seen in the last 3 by-elections, right? No, I think Ms. Freeland, particularly because of the skill with which she dealt with Donald Trump in Trump 1.0, is clearly the one that I would choose to take the fight back to him again. She's smart. She knows the drill with him. It's a different scenario, of course, because he's much more emboldened now than he was before. But, I used an expression that I may regret earlier today, but I honestly think that the Conservatives who wanted to capitulate to Mr. Trump the first time through, Mr. Poilievre gets squished like a bug. I'm sorry to say that, but I do not think that he would fare very well at all against somebody like Donald Trump.
So you're ready to endorse and support Chrystia Freeland should she decide she will run in right now, a hypothetical leadership race. There are a lot of people supposing from the language of her letter and an email she sent out to supporters that said words to the effect of "this is not the end of the road," that she's maybe getting ready to run. Do you know if there's any organizing? Have you had any conversations with her about this?
I may get some after this, but I think that if you just basically look at the track record and if you look at the hand that she's had in creating something like the Fall Economic Statement, which was an amazing piece of very progressive policy, and it's too bad that more attention isn't being paid on that because it was really solid stuff. And she had a huge hand in that and where we've come from and the things that we've accomplished. Wayne Long rattled off a whole list of them, and there's a longer list than that. So I think that of all the people that I've seen up and down the front bench, particularly with the situation with the U.S., that she's the one.
Okay, so we've learned some things here, that you signed the letter. You still think he should go, and you would like to see Chrystia Freeland replace Justin Trudeau, should he come to that decision. Wayne Long is calling out the cabinet, saying, look, the caucus has tried, the backbench has tried, it's up to the cabinet now to force this change at the top. What Chrystia Freeland did was a rare and extraordinary thing. Do you get the sense there are any other members of cabinet who might be prepared to take such a step?
Difficult to say. You read body language, you hear what is said and what isn't said. It is clear that there would be some members of cabinet who, at this point in time, may not be prepared to say something publicly, but in that big cabinet room would probably be very forthright.
Have you had, like Wayne Long, conversations with the cabinet ministers who say they agree with that there needs to be a change? They may not dislike the Prime Minister, they may be personally loyal to him, just acknowledging the political situation that it's untenable. Have you had those conversations with members of cabinet?
No, I haven't. But I mean, Wayne is right. It is unfortunate. It's not fair. I mean, we talked about this last time I was here, but it is what it is. And I mean, I can go back 6 years. And, when people were telling me, God, you got to get rid of this guy, right? Well, it's built to a pretty decent crescendo. Yeah. And that writing is there on the wall that we have to pay attention to.
Well, just one last question. I spoke to Mr. Collins, the MP for Hamilton East Stony Creek, I believe, is his riding last night. He's one of the 24 who signed the letter, and he has also called for the Prime Minister to go. He said last night that he believes the number of backbenchers, the number of non-cabinet caucus members who agree with the 24 original signatories, he figures that's double, if not triple. Like we're talking 50 to 75. What's your sense of where it is inside the caucus right now?
Yeah, I really wouldn't like to, try and predict that. I certainly haven't had a chance to canvass, caucus members on it. But a number of them, who are close to me, and we chat each other up, have, for the past few years, in fact, come forward and said that. But I think that the situation now, and particularly the happenings this week, really will probably draw out more people like myself, Wayne, and Chad. And it's truly unfortunate because I keep thinking of Mr. Trudeau in front of the cottage during the pandemic every day. Taking some really, really tough decisions at a time when we didn't know everything we needed to know. And again, as Wayne said, is it fair? Is it right? It is what it is, and we have to recognize that because, the country is potentially going to take a turn that'll be very damaging to it.
BC Liberal MP Ken Hurdy, always appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, David.
It's been 2 days since Chrystia Freeland set off a chain of dominoes within the Liberal government. And since she quit the cabinet, the number of Liberal MPs publicly calling for Justin Trudeau to resign has now reached at least 15.
I have the deepest admiration for him and for what he's done. He's been a transformational leader. But yes, I think he needs now to step aside. I don't see any viable path forward with the Prime Minister staying as our leader. I think now is the time to allow for a leader to take over and to really bring a different vision and a new energy to the party.
So what is next for Prime Minister Trudeau now that he faces the greatest challenge to his leadership yet? Rosemary Barton is the CBC chief political correspondent, and Louis Blouin is the parliamentary bureau chief for Radio Canada. Slow news week. Good to have you here.
I can't believe it's only Wednesday.
I know. At like 5 o'clock on Monday, I said, what a week. And I was like, oh my God, it's Monday. So Louis, where are we at 5:30 on Wednesday? We know there is a finance minister because of the events. Where do things stand? What's the latest you're hearing?
So we're hearing that the PM is thinking, he's making calls, he's meeting with people. We are hearing that there is a shuffle in the air, could happen this week. I'm told it would be a shuffle that would be kind of fill the holes for now, you know,
right.
with all the ministers that left this fall and just get the house in order before Christmas. And
Is Mark Carney part of this, or have they moved on? I'm just joking.
I don't think so. It's been quite a week. So, you know, it would be kind of an essential services shuffle if it happens this week. So we'll see. We got an info from our colleagues in New Brunswick. Dominique Leblanc said that he would not keep the public safety function portfolio, but that he would keep the border issue with him. That means that he might want to probably try to gain something with the contacts he developed south of the border in the last few weeks at the Mar-a-Lago dinner with the border czar. So that would stay in his yard. But, you know, when that change would happen, I think they have to try unload some ministers like Minister Leblanc, Ginette Petitpas-Taylor also took some responsibilities.
And need on. And
yeah, exactly. So that's where they are. About Mr. Trudeau, what I'm hearing, people around him, they think that he will need time to think about it during the holidays, maybe come back after the holidays, giving it a good thought and see where it goes from.
Okay, so it really sounds like Dominic LeBlanc-Rosie is going to be the point minister on Canada-U.S. relations, certainly in a big way, if he's going to have finance, the economy, intergovernmental affairs, and the border. That's multiple full-time jobs. What are you hearing about what's happening?
Yeah, largely the same thing. I mean, I will say, first of all, that we are not getting a lot of information today, that it is hard to get people to talk. And I think that's probably, to some extent, normal. The same kind of thing, that calls are being made by the Prime Minister and people around him, that they are asking people that they trust and consider good sources of advice, and that information is going back to the Prime Minister. And the advice is, what should he do? That's what they're looking for. I think in the meantime, as we all have been talking about today, they are trying to get a shuffle sorted. Not the shuffle that was on the table last Friday, which precipitated all of this and would have been a very dramatic move if it hadn't collapsed or gone up in flames, whatever analogy you want to use. They are, I understand the same as Louis, trying to just deal with the bit of a mess that they have on their hands right now with the ministers who have said they're not going to run again, and then the ministers who have multiple portfolios. So some people might think, well, if he's thinking about leaving, why would he bother doing that? And it's really, I think, to buy him some time. Right. You know, the government has to be functioning.
You need a public safety minister.
You need people to be doing these jobs. We have to project some level of competency to the president-elect. So this would allow that to happen, and it would buy the Prime Minister, I think, some time to go off and be with his family and think about things. I would say as well that I do think that there is a real reflection happening. I don't think it's like the last time where he thought about it for 5 minutes and he walked back into a room and said, I'm done thinking. I don't think that's where we're at. So I think they understand the magnitude of the crisis that is there. But I honestly don't know what happens past a shuffle.
Right.
I don't know what that looks like.
There's two cabinet ministers who told me this week that they believe that he will leave. It's a perception. It's not based on information, but their perception is that he might leave. So, I think it's, as Rosie said, it's pretty serious, what's going on and the reflection that is going on.
It's interesting because the conversations I've had, you get a mixed bag of interpretations, right? Yeah. Based on, everybody sees the body language different, right? Like the way Ken Hardy interpreted what he saw in the caucus the other night is different than how Sean Casey and Alexander,
no one really knows.
No, it's all voodoo, right?
Yeah.
But apparently in some of the conversations that he's having with the people he's reaching out to, I'm told asking to see like electoral maps and riding data and talking about paths and you know, arguing that, well, there isn't really enough time for a leadership and I'm still the best campaigner out there. And you know, look what we're doing with the border and these sorts of things as arguments for staying, whether he's made up his mind or not. I mean, Rosie, I don't know what you're hearing about things, but you know, those are sort of the arguments that they've been given all along about why he's still the right guy, even after St. Paul's, even after LaSalle, and even after the letter.
Sure. I mean, that none of that surprises me, given what we know about how Justin Trudeau operates as a politician. One, he doesn't like giving up. That is not something that he does easily. Two, he does like data. He likes evidence. He likes information. He likes to make decisions, policy decisions, driven by you know, proof and data. So I'm not surprised that he would want to see those things. And I do think there is a real serious concern about Donald Trump. Like, we are a month away from this. And if Justin Trudeau comes back in 10 days and says, I'm out, that is not necessarily the best case scenario for the country. Maybe it would be in the long run, I don't know. But in the immediate, the instability of things, I think also is probably sitting and heavily on him. That we will need a government that knows how to and can respond to this fairly quickly. Now, he could stay as you know, Prime Minister while they start a leadership race and all those kinds of things. But it is, I think, a factor that has not been there before in his thinking.
Maybe he's betting on Dominique Leblanc, who is his wingman the last few weeks, who was at the Mar-a-Lago dinner, who can have some discussion with the Trump officials. Maybe that's the way he wanted to secure things this week, and giving him also the finance portfolio just to make sure that things are stable. I think, you know, the most urgent thing was to send a signal of stability, continuity, and I think that's why he relied on Dominique Leblanc.
But you know, there's always the hope of this thing will change it. That thing will change it, right? It was going to be the Trump election that was going to change it, and then it was going to be interest rates, you know, and then maybe now it's we can avoid the tariffs, and that might turn things around. The data, Louis, is pretty clear. The public data is pretty clear. The by-election results are real data, not just opinion polls. Those are manifestly clear. What data could they be looking at that would change the views?
You know, I don't know. And honestly, I don't see any handle for the Prime Minister for now in all the data that we're seeing publicly in those polls that are going on. Look at every region of the country. In Atlantic, it's difficult. In Quebec, it's also difficult with the Bloc, who, you know, has seen a rise around the Montreal regions. There's going to be big fights for them there, and the Bloc is on top of the polls there. Ontario could be very difficult for him, you know, with the NDP, who could try and gain some seats in the urban area and around Toronto for the Conservatives. And then you look at the prairies, it's very difficult. Vancouver too. So where is the handle for the Prime Minister? I don't know.
So the only handle that I could see if I were him, and I would not want to be on any day, is to look at the people who would replace him. To look at the data behind the people who would replace him and whether they would fare any better. And I don't think we know the answer to that, but I don't think the answer resoundingly is absolutely. We can hold on to government if so-and-so becomes the leader. But I think that's probably the start of something, right? Like that he can at least look at that and consider, is there a better solution to me? Because he knows what he is capable of. He has a track record of winning. Until 6 months ago, he knows what he can do. And I do think that the other piece to watch now in the coming days is that piece, that is the leadership candidates that we all know have various softly organized pieces. And they are going to start gearing up. And I do think that Freeland, Chrystia Freeland, is moving in that direction. I don't think you can read anything that she has done this week in any other way.
It's a political statement, what she did in the letter on Monday. It's so clear. And what I'm going to be looking for in January, if Mr. Trudeau stays, if some other ministers start to, position themselves more clearly. Because I think now everybody's being polite, leaving him have this reflection, thinking, giving time. But, if it doesn't move, now we might start.
Yes, it might get really ugly for him.
Well, Wayne Long made the point in his letter that it's time to stop being polite, and Cabinet needs to start doing what the caucus has been doing. And he says some of them are doing it privately and then going in front of the cameras and publicly saying, oh, we're all united behind the Prime Minister, which the minute you say something different, you're out. But just as a final point, Rosie, you said the data may not say that a replacement would do better and win the next election. I I don't have a Liberal I've spoken with who thinks the goal is winning the next election. It's surviving the next election. You know what I mean? And it's about coming second. It's about being the opposition, because anything less than that.
Or even not second, you just...
No, but the goal would be coming second,
that's right. So that you don't end up in fourth. Sure, but I'm just saying, if they're making the case to him in various ways, here's what you need to know, as well as all the bad things, I think he has to also look at that reality. But I think Louis' point is an excellent one. If he decides to stay, if somehow that's where he ends up in his thought process, I think the people that want that job are going to...
Gone?
No, I think they're coming for him. I think it will be a potentially very ugly leadership race if he doesn't decide to step aside himself, because people, I think, are losing patience and have large ambitions of their own.
Liberal also told me this week that Monday was the start of the leadership race.
Yeah.
So
I would agree, yeah.
There's crazy talk in this town. I've heard some people have even said they don't want to go into cabinet when approached, right? Which would be a remarkable thing, to say no to the offer
If you're
of a
only going to
cabinet
be there
post.
for 5 minutes, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. But it goes on the resume for life, right?
That's
I mean,
true,
who knows,
that's
right? All right. Well, look, if either of you get invited into the cabinet, let me know. Come
Never.
back.
No, thank you.
I'm sure it'll be a slow news week for the rest of the week. We'll all get a peaceful holiday. Louis Blouin, Rosemary Barton, always appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
David.
It's been 2 days since Chrystia Freeland's shock cabinet resignation, and while the list of Liberal MPs calling for the Prime Minister to step down grows by the day, there are still some urging he take the holidays to think about it.
Everybody talks about the elephant in the room, and sadly, the elephant in the room is Justin Trudeau.
Monday was a tough day. It's obvious to anyone paying attention to politics. I think there's got to be a well thought out reflection over the holidays as to what he sees as the path forward.
I don't see any viable path forward with the Prime Minister staying as our leader.
Moments of reflection are really important, and I think spending the holidays to listen to what my people in my constituency want is going to be how I'm going to spend my time.
The general buzz, though, and it's been this way for 6 years, in fact, is that people in degrees were turning away from him, and it's reached a crescendo at this point.
Since Chrystia Freeland resigned, we still have not heard directly from Justin Trudeau, at least about the specifics of that issue. And now there are rumors of a last-minute shuffle to fill the holes in the cabinet. That gives us a lot to talk about with our Wednesday Power Panel on the week that never ends. Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communication strategist. Brad Levine is a former National Campaign Director for the NDP. And here with me in Ottawa is Gary Keller, a former Chief of Staff to Conservative ministers and the party that is having the best week right before Christmas. Look at him. He's got a certain type of eating grin on his face. Amanda, let's start with you. I mean, more and more ministers keep saying, sorry, MPs say, not ministers, say the Prime Minister has to go, and it's grown and people are revealing themselves in a way, and you're getting the kind of quotes you only ever got anonymously now in rapid sequence on camera. I mean, what do you think is going to happen with the leadership of that party?
I mean, listen, we've been obviously talking about this every day since Monday, but even before that. And one of the things that I still have a hard time getting my head around, and I think about Mulrooney Campbell as an example of this. So I'm going to go way back to 93 when, Mulrooney announced that he was leaving politics in February of 93. Kim Campbell took over as, she took over as leader in June of 93. And they went to election in October of 93, where that party was decimated. I think they won 2 seats at the time. And so the challenge I'm having with this idea of resignation is time for a number of reasons. It's like, is there time? Could you prorogue? Is there time to have some kind of leadership race, get to the next election? And if so, who is the leader that's going to step up to do that? If we have examples like Kim Campbell, who's going to put their name on the ballot, knowing that the position that we're in heading into the polls, it's very unlikely that we can win this election looking at it from the perspective of today. stay unless something really dramatic changes. So you're really just doing it sort of in an interim way. I think that poses an enormous challenge. And then, of course, the other challenge is really around Trump and these tariffs and the negotiations. And to have this kind of destabilizing effect heading into the new year, these are all calculations that I'm sure, the Prime Minister is considering and the Prime Minister's office is considering and all the advisors, because it's not just as simple as him resigning and walking away. There are so many implications that follow. And obviously, one outcome is for him to see it through the next election and then have a new leader build fresh.
So Gary, from the Conservative side of the perspective, I mean, those are the arguments for Trudeau to stay. That leaving doesn't necessarily automatically make it better, and you could keep Kim Campbell, whoever comes after you. How do you view that? Because a lot of the Conservatives I speak with say they really hope he does stick around because it's the best set of circumstances for them.
Well, what the Prime Minister's been saying, taking his time to reflect. There's so much reflecting going on. There was reflecting going on 6 weeks ago. Now there's more reflecting going on. Look, the Conservatives are ready to run a campaign against anybody else. They are by far the best funded party, by far, compared to the other parties. They have the most candidates nominated. And so they'll go against anybody. But the problem with the conversation that we're having, and we've been framing it, and look, I get it. We're here in Ottawa. We're inside the Ottawa bubble. We enjoy the who's up, who's down conversation. But the tenor and the crux of this conversation is all about party over country, party first. What is the Liberal Party going to do? What is that going to do to the Liberal Party? The problem is we have all these challenges, and the Prime Minister needs to make clear what his plans are before the end of the week. Now, we hear there may be a cabinet shuffle later this week, but the Prime Minister needs to make these clear. We've seen a drop in the dollar recently, not all related, but in a day or two.
It's a psychological thing to go to those 70 cents.
It's a psychological thing. We need to have clarity on this before the end of the week. We can't go into the holiday weekend with people unsure about.
But why by the end of the week? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just please explain why you think that we need to know by Friday.
I think the country can't wait any longer. They can't go into the holiday season with this ongoing battle with Donald Trump, with the dollar the way it is, with all the other challenges that Canada faces. The country needs clarity on this so we can move on one way or another.
Okay, Brad, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm old enough to remember when the Conservative caucus was calling for an election over Christmas, which is also a big period of uncertainty. But what do you think? I mean, clarity is good, right? Knowing what is going to happen will be good. Do you think we need it by Friday, or do you think the Prime Minister can wait until, say, first week of January?
Well, he can, but I don't think he should, nor do I think he will. I think that it is this week because, again, this notion of reflection, he needs to take the holiday time to think about his future. He's being called upon to consider his future now for many, many, many months. There have been signs that his time, the best before date, has passed us. And what happened on Monday, I don't think we can run the risk of overstating what happened. But the Deputy Prime Minister of this country, just gave the Prime Minister, basically refuted his entire affordability by calling the GST holiday gimmicks. She basically said that you're not up for the job to stand up to Donald Trump. You're not serious, and that you've blown out our fiscal levers. And I think what we saw by calling on her Friday saying, I know you don't believe most of the stuff in the fall economic statement that I want you to read. I want you to read it anyways, and then I'm going to fire you on Tuesday. Now, just that alone doesn't take much more time that he needs to.
I got to just stop you there. I'm not trying to say the letter wasn't withering, but people around Freeland have been pushing that what actually made it into the fall economic statement is largely things she's good with and wanted. That the implication, the gimmicks is the $250 checks and things like that rather than the GST holiday.
She didn't call them gimmicks, though, David.
No, she didn't specify. She does talk about costly political. No, hang on now. Hang on. No, Brad. There's a lot of just stuff out there. But the GST holiday is about $1.5 billion. The $250 checks are $5 billion and more if they expand it to everybody that they want it for. That's the one policy she would never defend in public. She never got behind it. So she may be talking about that. So I just want to say that, and otherwise, please continue your point.
But let's say that she did say that she wanted to stay to a $40 billion fiscal anchor. That was blown by $20 billion. I don't think it was her that was asking for more spending. The bottom line is there was a huge disagreement. Policy and listen, fantastic speech or interview yesterday, David. Premier or former Prime Minister Chrétien's former chief of staff,
Right.
who basically said that this is not the same as Chrétien Martin back in the 90s because there is no policy. There's serious policy difference between the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister. The bottom line here is, ever since Toronto St. Paul's by-election loss, there have been signals given by the people of Canada, most recently on Monday by the people of Langley Cloverdale, who basically 66% for the opposition over a former incumbent seat. The bottom line is there's not much more to think here. The only thing that I think that needs to be decided, which is why he's silent, which is why it's taking him as long as it has been, is to figuring out whether there's an interim prime minister, that is somebody that takes over for him Friday night, or whether he sticks around until either the caucus or the membership choose a new leader.
Yeah, look, and Brad, just I'm not trying to suggest for 1 second her using the phrase costly political gimmicks isn't damning. We just don't know what the gimmicks are that she's referring to with absolute.
Don't you think that's a problem in and of itself?
That is absolutely a problem. That's where I was going to go with it, because Rob, she is suggesting there are efforts at minimum to indulge in costly political gimmicks, and those are coming from the Prime Minister and his team and not from her. And she confirms all of the reporting that she has stood there in news conferences and taken questions about how she's been undermined. She's confirmed it, laid it at the feet of the Prime Minister's office, and then walked out the door with the hand grenade of the costly political gimmicks. And Canadians know when we're working for them and working for ourselves as her parting gift from Cabinet, right?
Yeah, David, the letter was devastating. I agree with you. I think that the gimmicks she was talking about were those $250 checks to 18 million Canadians plus maybe, that was one of the most badly rolled out gimmicks that I'd ever seen. I was speaking to a Liberal MP who said it's unbelievable we could spend this much money and still tick off this many people. Anyway, it seems to be not happening now. But these last 3-4 days have just seemed like an Armando Iannucci political satire. It's like Veep or the thick of it. Think about it. Take a step back. You're asking the finance. You're the Prime Minister. You ask you ask the finance minister on a Friday on a Zoom call. Deliver the feds on Monday, and then I'm gonna replace you with the former Bank of Canada governor on the following Wednesday, who by the way, Carney ends up not taking the job. So who is now the Minister of Everything? The Prime Minister's former babysitter, Dominic LeBlanc, which is so crazy to me that a guy who used to babysit the PM when he was a kid is now his Minister of Everything. As Doug Ford told Dominic LeBlanc, Dom, you still do babysit the Prime Minister, and I mean it is so crazy, and Gary's right. It's destabilizing, and it sends the optics are not good. Meanwhile you've got this lunatic incoming president calling for Canada to be the 51st state. Yeah. This whole thing really does feel like a satire, and if it wasn't so serious, if we weren't on the precipice of a recession, it would be almost funny. Well, look, it's not. This is a very serious situation.
Canada isn't a state, but it's in a state. And I tell you, the Veep comparison, I made that on the air Monday when they were pulling the blinds across in front of that shot we had into the caucus room. Yeah. But, Amanda, here we are, 72 hours, I don't know, however many hours it's been since 9:07 a.m. Monday morning. We have talked about Chrystia Freeland. We have talked about Justin Trudeau. We've talked about Mark Carney. We have not heard from Chrystia Freeland. We have not heard from Mark Carney, and we have not heard from Justin Trudeau beyond a couple of rah-rah speeches to Liberal crowds, not directly dealing with this. I mean, what do you make of this utter silence beyond Chrystia Freeland's very explicit letter from the key players in this whole drama?
Well, if I were advising Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, I would tell them to do exactly the same thing. And I'm sure there's some nodding heads on the panel as well, because they don't have to say anything right now. Chrystia Freeland said everything she wanted to say in the statement. And, why do a media circuit and have to answer a bunch of questions? She said what she wanted to say. The next thing that she will say, I'm sure, will be, post a decision that comes from Trudeau. But until then, I would keep the powder dry on that. And Carney Friday. Nobody knows what happened from Friday until today. And I think he's, likely watching this play out and has a similar perspective on it. I mean, anybody who has aspirations to be leader of this party is going to watch this play out before they become part of the fracas. Like, why would they want to put themselves in the middle of the muck? They're going to hold back, watch how it lands, and then decide when they're going to make their play. And I think, one further thing that I'll say is that Trudeau has been clear up until this point on many occasions, right? His resignation has been called for, and he's said that he's staying on to lead the party into the next election. This is a renewed call, but it's not like he's gone for months and months without being clear. He has been clear, and I would expect that we will hear from him in the coming days with that kind of clarity again. I mean, he hasn't shied away from making his intentions clear, whether MPs, whether Canadians like it or not.
No, it reminds me of when Joe Biden said he was staying, and Nancy Pelosi goes, well, we need him to come to his decision. And she was told, well, he's made a decision. She goes, oh, we need him to come to his decision. But do you think we'll get a public and definitive answer from the Prime Minister by the end of this week, Amanda? I mean, if he's going to shuffle his cabinet on Friday, he kind of can't do that and stay completely silent. I mean, what do you think happens?
No, exactly. I don't know. And I think that given, I think somebody called it a crescendo, I think that it's at a fever pitch right now. And I think that it's incumbent upon the Prime Minister to say something. And I think that there's no way that you can go through this holiday period, with Trump with his thumbs on the keyboard, and leave this kind of destabilizing effect where Canadians don't know what's going on, and we're leaving the U.S. in a much more powerful position. And also, you're leaving everyone else in a vacuum where then you have the voices of, backbench MPs filling up your pages. So this is an opportunity for him, really. If he wants to set the narrative leading into the holidays and into 2025, he has to do it before the holidays. He cannot wait until January.
Yeah. No, I think by Friday we might have had the entire Liberal caucus on the show. But Gary, very quickly, do you think we'll get the answer by Friday? And what do you think the answer might be from Prime Minister Trudeau?
Well, I think to that point, if he's going to shuffle the cabinet, he can't just do it silently. And if I were him, I'd pick one outlet and do one interview. Apparently, he's canceled all the year-end interviews with everybody. Conventional wisdom is talking either prorogation or resignation. I actually think, I'm going to go against the grain of conventionalism, say he's going to try to power through. That would be in keeping with the man's MO, his hubris, quite frankly, but that would be in keeping with how he has operated.
My sense is that may be the most likely outcome, but who the heck knows?